Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here. I refrain from commenting on the first part of the panel, although there were a number of things I would have liked to say something about. Instead, I picked out my cell phone and just tweeted what for me was one of the great statements in the very beginning. It came from Clara, and she said, relating to our topic here, adherence and compliance, doctors want patients to adhere to treatment, while patients want diabetes to adhere to life. I tweeted that, and it's currently being retweeted amongst the community, and I want to talk about this community and about social media and what comes with it. Clara, thanks for that statement. I like that very much. Yes, I'm Bastian. I'm not here as a sailor, although I'm also often being introduced as the sailing diabetic. There is a reason to it, which lies in my personal history. I was diagnosed with diabetes age 19. I was in the middle of my civil service, and I was planning to sail around the world at that time. I come from a small village in northern Germany. Sailing is my passion. It's always been part of my life. And coming from a small town, meeting my first doctor, who was not a diabetes specialist, went in a nutshell like this: well, Bastian, you're diabetic, now forget about sailing. That hit me more than the diagnosis as such. And it took me 10 years to understand that he might have possibly been wrong. And 10 years later, I actually bought a boat and I was planning to spend 1 year doing a bit of sailing on the Baltic. I ended up spending 3 years sailing around the world, including Southern Ocean, Antarctica, and Cape Horn. So I guess he was wrong. But I'm not going to tell you about sailing. I used to. When I first was invited to diabetes conferences, I talked sailing, and I showed great pictures from the Southern Ocean, which was great fun, and I still enjoy doing that. But today we're talking about adherence and compliance issues. And I must say, when Sylvia invited me to come, my first reaction was rather, I don't know, because I actually don't like these words. I don't like the word adherence, and I don't like the word compliant. And it relates, again, to what Clara was saying. Because, like I said, for me, the diagnosis of diabetes in the beginning meant diabetes equals not sailing. And not sailing, for me, meant, well, life's coming to an end in a way. The result of that was not that I was being a good diabetic who was very adherent and very compliant. The result was that I was quite rebellious towards my diabetes throughout the first 10 plus years. And I'm still kind of, health-wise, I'm still suffering from these first 10 years. Heike was talking about the changing moment. For you, it was your pregnancy. For me, it was the day when I decided to say, fuck this, and buy a boat and go sailing. Because I actually decided for myself to turn this one-directional thing around and say, you know what? If I want to go sailing, I think I have to manage my diabetes better. And that motivated me to actually do just that, and that led to what you would then call adherence and compliance. But it wasn't for me ever adherence or compliance, because it was not my doctor who told me, Bastian, if you want to go sailing, you have to watch out and do better diabetes care, because then you will be able to go sailing. Had they said that 10 years earlier, things would have gone very differently, also health-wise. They didn't. Things have moved on a lot. This is 20 years ago, right? I know we're not there anymore, I hope. But for me, I had to make that change. So for me, being a good diabetic, or as my doctor would have called it, nice, adherent, and compliant, was not him making me adherent and compliant. It was me understanding that it is up to me to motivate myself to be better in charge, to be better informed, to manage my diabetes so that I could go sailing. That was my motivation. All right. Enough of sailing. Let's talk about new approaches in adherence. Peer-to-peer support by social media is what we call this short talk. And you might wonder what's new about this, because peer-to-peer support, although it sounds grand, is nothing new. It is a very old traditional thing. It's self-help, right? It's communities, it's people who get together, patients trying to understand each other, helping each other, talking amongst themselves, sometimes with a diabetes nurse or a coach, as you would say, sometimes with a doctor, sometimes in a clinical setting or not, but it's nothing new as such. And while social media maybe is a bit newer, or everything that's online, you were saying, I run the diabetes online community or the German chapter thereof. So diabetes and community, again, it's nothing new. Maybe the word online is, although it's not that new anymore, online has been dominating our lives since the 80s or so. So social media and online maybe is just changing something that we've been doing all along in diabetes care, which is getting patients together, sitting with them, and seeing if they can support each other. And for me, it's not something in itself, it's a means to an end. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the channels that I use and we use in the community on a daily basis, they don't create value in themselves for diabetes care, but they are a new channel. They are a new channel to maybe reach out to people that we couldn't reach otherwise. They are a channel to reach out in a different way that we haven't before. And they are channels where we can reach people in their daily lives because we do live in what I always call the Amazon Prime Time age, right? We kind of expect things to happen 24/7. If I order something now and it's not there the next day by 10 a.m., then it's too late. When we started the diabetes online community in Germany about 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of felt like I was running into very thick concrete brick walls, because the reaction from traditional healthcare and even from peer-to-peer support groups, as I would say, or from the official, the German Diabetes Associations, was something like, so you're trying to replace the doctors by Dr. Google. I was like, no, not really. And they were like, well, but you're trying to replace the traditional self-help and community work by Facebook and social media. And I was like, no, I'm not actually trying to replace anything. I just think, and that's why I'm saying that, I think it's a different channel of doing something that we've always done before. So when we're talking about new approaches, everything that we do in the online community and that we do online is not really new. It's a new means to an end. It's a new channel or a new way of doing things that we have been doing. Although, when doing things new, and that's what digitalization is currently doing to the whole of society. Digitalization, when it started, was merely making things that were analog before digital, right? So when you go to diabetes, it was turning a diabetes diary that you would do in handwriting into a digital form of a diabetes diary. That's not new, that's just doing it differently. Same for radio, right? When we had analog radio and suddenly we were switched to, what's it called, DVB-T in German, digital radio, it didn't really change the way we listen to radio, right? It was just a different frequency. For us listening to the radio, it didn't really make a difference. However, as digitalization proceeds, whether that's in driving or in radio or in diabetes care, switching from analog to digital, although it's just doing things we've always done analog in a digital way, actually does have some major impacts, because switching channels changes habits. We'll get to that later. What we do with the diabetes online community is we don't replace doctors, we don't replace traditional self-help. We focus on something that peer-to-peer support has always done, and that for me is motivational support. And we focus on this 24/7 aspect of things, 24/7 companionship in ways that without social media was not possible before. Because if you look at timescales, diabetes, we always say, diabetes is 24/7, it's 364 days a year, we don't get a break. That's the patient perspective. You as a doctor have half an hour every 3 months. That's the average in Germany. Might differ from country to country, but how often do you see your patients on average? I'd say half an hour every 3 months is already quite good. That's not 24/7, 364 Amazon Prime Time age. Maybe with a diabetes nurse or the diabetes team, that is better, because maybe you get to see your patients once a month. And I would assume for your average patient, that's already quite optimistic. Then there's family and friends and other patients and community work, etc. And maybe that works better. Maybe You see each other really once a month in a group, or maybe even once a week. And of course, you can rely on your spouse, on your husband or your wife. And of course, your parents are there if you're a kid, or your kids are there to lift you up if you, as an aging elderly, are getting frail and don't know how to deal with your diabetes anymore. And maybe that works on a daily basis, but family life and friends are not circulating around diabetes at all the time, and they shouldn't. Life is about more than diabetes, right? And even for me, where diabetes is 24/7, I don't want to think about 24/7 about it all the time. But in this age, I do require this. If I need support now, I want it now. And I don't want to wait for my next doctor's appointment in 3 months. I don't want to wait for my next nurse appointment in 3 weeks. I don't want to wait until my girlfriend comes home in the afternoon. I have an issue right now and I want it solved now. This is what digitalization is kind of doing to all of society. And this is where social media and diabetes care can actually make a difference, because social media is that responsive. It is there 24/7. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. This is where it gets into storytelling, but it's fun. It's this hypo 2 hours after midnight thing, where maybe your girlfriend is lying next to you and you could wake her up, and but you don't really need that. You kind of know your way to the fridge and you get your orange juice, but then you kind of awake. And let's say you're 19, like I was then, you're newly diagnosed, and this is your first more or less severe hypo. Maybe you don't even have a girlfriend. I didn't then. So you're 19, you're newly diagnosed, this is your first severe hypo. You did get this education. You were asking that before. You did get the education. You do know how to make your way to the fridge. You managed to get your sugar levels back to 120. But then you're kind of wondering, okay, so they told me if I go hypo, I need to push my sugar levels up, and I did that, but can I go back to bed? Does this come back, or when, and how long does it take? Is there anything else I need to do? Is orange juice actually enough, or did they tell me something else? Maybe I forgot some of the things they told me in this class, because this was half a year ago and was 3 weeks intensive course, and the first 3 weeks were 3 months or 6 months were honeymoon, and I don't remember all the details. So it's 2 a.m. in the morning. Who do I call? Who do I ask? You, the doctors? I don't think so. My nurse? I don't think so. My girlfriend, or at that time non-existent girlfriend, my mother at 19? Come on. But my Facebook friends, some of them with diabetes, they will be there. They will probably be up at 2 a.m. because some of them live in Australia. So if I sit down and enter Facebook and say, hey, having my first severe hypo, it's 2 in the morning, just had some orange juice, I'm at 120, is that okay? They are there. They might give me bullshit answers. They don't know my real HbA1c, they don't know my insulin treatment, and I shouldn't probably ask them whether I should take insulin and how much units or how many units, but at least they're there. Other issues, going a bit away from this 24/7 aspects, because that's not the only thing where social media makes a difference. There are issues that you don't really want to talk about, neither with your diabetes team nor your doctor. Let's look at a 65-year-old type 2 patient. He's kind of probably had diabetes for 30 years. He was diagnosed maybe just 15 years ago. He's been kind of managing without insulin, and he still is doing all right, and he's having this contract with his HCP of still keeping it without insulin, although the doctor kind of knows it's not good, and he kind of has understood that it's not good, but they're still having this, who said this? This unspoken contract that you extend this as long as possible. But there's one thing that he doesn't talk to his doctor about ever, and that's, the sex thing at 65 is still kind of interesting, but it's really starting to be different, and he doesn't really know. Does this relate to diabetes, or is it just, am I just getting old? He doesn't really want to ask his wife, because she knows, he knows, they kind of each know that the other person knows, but they don't talk about it. And the doctor is a lady, 10 years younger than him. The nurses are like in their mid to 20s to mid 30s. Hell no, he's not going to ask them about, So what do? Who do you ask these kind of questions to? 65, right? That's, Okay, maybe he dares to go to a library, but then you have to talk to that librarian and it's all not. But this Silver Surfer generation, don't underestimate them. It takes a minute to get a new Gmail address that you can track back to you, and with that Gmail address, you can get a Twitter account that you name. Maybe you name yourself Mr. Ed Brown because it kind of sounds sexy. His real name is Ronald. That's not so cool. But Ed Brown kind of sounds good. And then as Ed Brown, he goes to Twitter and kind of puts a sneaky question out there. Just, he knows nobody can know who he is, whether it's his neighbor, his wife, or somebody 10,000 kilometers away. But you know what happens? There's other Twitter users out there. 3 days later, when he comes back to, he doesn't do Twitter on a daily basis, but 3 days later, so he posted this question, very kind of timid, like, is diabetes after 50? Maybe, I'm having this, I don't know. And then 3 days later, he opened his Twitter account, and there's answers. There's people who've answered. And you know what's really cool? It's not only other men who say, yeah, I know the problem. I'm 75, had this for 10 years. It sucks. You know what? Diabetes sucks, but think about talking to your doctor about it because it helped me, and maybe you should switch to insulin. Or maybe somebody will tell him about Viagra. I don't know if that's a reason or that's a solution. But you know what he really likes about this? There's ladies answering him. There's 2 ladies out there who say, you know what? This is so cool you're talking about this. I'm a lady. My husband is type 1. Or my husband is type... He would never talk about this. And we've had these problems for years and we don't talk about this. You're so brave. Okay, so this is all happening on Twitter, but it does make a difference. Different example, anger. You're at your HCP or at your diabetes specialist and there's some new rule in town or in your healthcare system. You're being put on a different glucose meter. You have to use different test strips. You don't like them. They changed your insulin plans without really explaining. You don't really dare to ask, or you don't want to ask. You don't understand it maybe, but you're pissed. You've had this meter for 10 years, and why should you use something else now because the other one is cheaper? And your doctor just gives you that meter, and he doesn't really want to discuss because it's on his budget. So you just get this meter. You just don't like it. Now that's something. If you're not a strong character, you're not going to oppose your doctor because he's always been your doctor. He's in your village. He's known you and your kids and your wife for 20 years. You don't want to get into a fight, but you're still not happy, and you kind of. Every time you measure your blood sugar, you notice you start measuring less because you don't like this new meter and you're just not happy. Now you want to vent your anger? Well, you can. You can use a different channel. You can use the community, forums, or and just write about it and vent your anger. Now that's not something very constructive, that's not medical, but maybe somebody will say, well, I feel the same, or maybe you see others that do the same, and maybe somebody has a solution for you. And again, going back to a young type 1, all these diabetes apps out there, right? All these new things popping up more and more by the week. I don't know how many hundreds of diabetes apps and toys are out there. Some of them might be really, really good. Some of them are really crap. I know quite many of them. I am very engaged in e-health, m-health, etc. Now, I assume some of you are doctors. If I come into your practice and ask you, should I use this, or that app, which one is best for you? What do you do? Do you know? Really? Like, can you tell me which is the best app for me? And if I then want to get into an argument about, well, this one I've actually looked at and I've gone through all the functions, it sends server data to the United States, that's why I don't like that. And this one here, I don't like the color. And here, we have 15 minutes, right, every 3 months. Do you want to have this discussion during these 15 minutes, or would you rather focus on, I think you have a problem with starting dawn phenomenon in the morning? That's more important, right? So what you can do is you can read other blogs and see what other bloggers use and follow their advice, and maybe you find a lot of information on which apps make sense for some, which apps don't make sense for others. Now, none of this is very medical, none of this is very related to the topic of adherence. I'm just trying to show you that social media and the diabetes online community has certain areas where it kind of makes sense that it's there. I think a good way to sum it up is that the Diabetes Online community provides this kind of motivational support on the one hand, and this 24/7 companionship in this today's digitalized Amazon Prime Time age in a way that wouldn't be possible without social media. And it's moving this Amazon Prime Time thinking that we've adopted into the healthcare system. So how does this relate to our topic, adherence to treatment? To be honest, I don't know. And maybe it doesn't relate at all, because what we do in the Diabetes Online community is in more than 90% of everything that we talk and fuss and discuss about is not medical at all, and it's not about adherence, and it's not about medication and insulin plans, and it shouldn't be, because that's why we turn to you, and that's why you should be there and why we need you. But what it is about, this peer-to-peer social media thing, it's about motivation. And that has been a strong point in the discussion before. And maybe it is about education. It's about talking amongst ourselves, and maybe also talking with you, with some of you at least, about how to be a better diabetic, how to be better educated, how to better manage your condition. So it links to your statement in the beginning that where you said, you know, when this one patient was there and you saw the tears in her eyes, the whole debate about evidence-based medicine went out the window, and you had to just hold her hand and say her, it's going to be all right, girl. That's what we do. And that does have an effect on what you would then call adherence. Because if I feel it's going to be all right, I'll make better decisions. I'll feel more confident. And it also links to Heike's motivation of, you know, when you're pregnant, you need people to talk to on a daily basis, because pregnancy is something that you deal with on a daily basis. And it links to this, I want diabetes to adhere to my lifestyle, which happens every day, of course, and not every 3 months in the office. So, that's not very scientific right here, but that's what I wanted to say, and I look forward to the debate. Thanks.